What was the main gist of what he said?
It's basically saying it's all very nice to say the Torah. It's a major Aliyah in the John that he said the main thing what he would have wanted he believed.
What was the main gist of what he said?
Did you hear it?
Basically, they make you say Torah in Nishmasai?
Yeah, he said within a day and a half they'd raised 40,000.
Wow.
Yeah, mainly from his friends. And anyway.
What was he doing? Where was he? He was in work?
No, he was in Yeshiva. He was here for now, but I think he was mainly in Yeshiva. No? So the main thing he would have wanted is for us to look after ourselves and for us to look after each other. He said this is the golus nowadays, the Da'al Nefesh. He said if you know how many people suffer, there used to be a few Yechidim. He said so many people are struggling with anxiety and stress. And just got to look out for them.
So we'll have to be nice to each other.
Basically.
Promise is hard though.
No, he's saying in Yeshiva that they're talking about making groups, official groups of 4 or 5
I've carried this around for days. That's the last illusion for him. Pass it to Tony.
No, he said they're making groups in Yeshiva, 4 or 5 people, boys.
Yes.
And meet like once a week just to try to talk to each other and make it clear.
Yeah, pass it to me. Let me see. I'll pass you. Ask a random question.
100%. I want to see like a mock one, like answers.
Yeah, this is the answers.
Oh wow.
I got you the answer sheet as well.
GCSEs.
You go through one of the next. We'll go for the last.
Take the issue instead this year. GCSEs, you can give out the issue.
Yes, that's a good idea.
This is the most recent one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is the most one.
Oh, wow.
How do we work per period? How do we do per period?
Okay, this is quite not such a hard one. It's 30 daf. It's actually quite a lot for daf, 60 pages. You really must get going. Can you prove that even though you can't be yotze with something from matzah, you can still have chorus for it for chametz? Yeah, but pass no.
Where?
No. Liquidized matzah is not good enough for matzah, but it is chorus and chametz. Because there's a Gemara that says, "Oh, it's only 58. Let's get going." No, that's not how. So it's not
no hope whatsoever.
No tomorrow.
What?
No other.
No.
Also.
If you're not going to use it, maybe okay. Actually, I don't need to tell. Yeah, look at it. It's okay. We're up to Nun Beis Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. Let's get into it. Rav Nosson Barasya, Ozani Beirav Pumpadisa. He went from Beis Hamedrash to Pumpadisa. Beyom Tov Sheni Shel Atzeros on second day Shavuos. Shamte Rabbi Yosef put him in the Chayim. And from here the Mechaber Paskins in Tov Samach Ches. That if somebody goes against the Minig HaMokoim, put him in the Chayim. Can you imagine such a thing? And later they're going to say we'll give him Malchus. It's a Chomedik halachas, these halachas. Again, what happened was he went on second day. Imagine somebody drives up to Manchester, second day, where he wasn't actually driving, he was walking, he came out of the Tchum. Imagine somebody walks up in Manchester on the second day Yom Tov. So he put him in the Chayim. He's come out of the Tchum. And he was from, I should have said this right, and he was keeping a 1 day. And because he was from Eretz Yisrael, not just because he was on the board day, he was in Baba, but he knew which day was Yom Tov. So therefore, he went to a place which they keep 2 days, having clearly shown by his actions that he's only keeping 1 day. He should have hit him. Halacha is we'll give him Malchus. I did what's harsher, what's worse, getting Malchus or putting him in the Chayim? Why? Actually, I must admit it's Machlokes Rishonim. Rashi says that Chayim is much worse.
Isolation.
Oh, I thought Tony was dashing a few minutes ago.
It's Malchus over, yeah, you get hit, but at least.
I did for him what's worse to be Marova. What's Marova? What is Marova? Yeah, where's west? Eretz Yisrael. I know it's very confusing. Marova Eretz Yisrael in the west. Mimnu and Egida de Bar Beirav. They would sometimes gather together and decide to hit a Talmud Chacham. Mimnu Shamta, but they never put somebody in Chayim. A Talmud Chacham in Chayim. So Rashi asks loads of questions in this Gemara. Question number 1 is why did he be Mizal in the second day? Did not know. And second of all, if that's the case that we don't put the Talmud Chacham in the Chayim, why did he put him in the Chayim? So regarding the second question, he brings from the Meiri that sometimes to be making davar tiloi, meaning that sometimes when it was particularly important, they would even put something in the chayim. And he says that could be that this was the time when they were establishing this takana, and therefore he wasn't aware. Since he wasn't aware, they felt it was even more important. It was like when you're originally establishing something, you make an example. Make an example.
If he's doing a thing that he's not chacham, he would be doing otherwise.
No. See, since the fact that Gemara calls him Rab Nos and Baas, it means it was a Talmud Chacham. Say that there is right. So any Amora which is mentioned in the Gemara with the word Rav, we would know that he could do Tchias HaMesim. So he wasn't. Ikadamri. Yeah, Ikadamri. Nagdei of Yosef. Yosef hit him. Omla Abayim Shamtim Ma. Dav Shmuel David Shabayim and Nad Nashneim and David Shagol spot in Chem. When I animate this down, a normal person, the Tovale Avdi, I do the better one. The Marova Mimnu and I gathered to the Rav, the Mimnu Ashamto. They would sometimes put Talmud Chacham for Malchus, but not for Chem. This is all Rashi's Malach. I'm going to stick to Rashi's Malach. That what's Rashi saying? What's the Gemara saying? Basically, that there was a Moira that went against this halacha, and there was a question whether to put him in Chem or whip him. The Gemara's got two versions of the story, what they did to him. The Gemara says that for Talmud Chacham usually were more gentle. In this particular case, perhaps they were not, to make an example. Going back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah talks again about Shemitah. The halacha of Shemitah is there's such a thing called Zman Habiur. Zman Habiur is when there's no more fruit left, produce in the fields, and the wild animal can't get, you have to do Biur. Now the Mishnah says that if you go from A to B, and in A it was finished, and B there wasn't, or vice versa. In A it wasn't finished, and B it's finished, what's the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says we do the chumras of both. So let's say we're going from Manchester to Gated, or Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim, and if Bnei Brak is still oranges left, Yerushalayim there isn't, or vice versa. You have to destroy the oranges. We'll discuss later what exactly you do to them, but you have to do biur when you get to Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says, what's the words of the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda says the last few lines of the Mishnah, Nunamud Beis, Rabbi Yehuda say, go and bring for yourself. It's a very cryptic comment. What does it mean, go and bring for yourself? What does that mean? The Gemara in the Havin understands that he means like this. That we're talking about some Jews coming from a town that is not finished. There's loads of oranges left. And he goes to a town where there's no oranges left. So everybody in that town has already done biur. So the Mishnah says the Chachamim hold that you give him chumrei mokim sheholach misham and chumrei mokim both chumras. So when he gets to the town that has no oranges left, what does he have to do? He has to do biur. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and says, why should he do biur? He should tell everybody around, I don't have a problem with you. You want to get oranges, go to Bnei Brak, get the oranges yourself. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda is being mekel. That is the Gemara's understanding and the Havamid of the Gemara. He's being mekel. And the logic of the kula is what? You go and get yourself. I got myself. You go and get yourself. Rashi again says a nice point. He says it's not so much of a zulzul. When I am machmir on something and you are not, so I'm showing I'm more important than you. But when I treat my oranges different than yours, then it's less of a zulzul. Because my oranges didn't come from your oranges, so therefore it's not a zulzul. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara is meaning the words of Yehuda. Blessed Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanan. Do we not keep the chumras? Rashi explains that from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda never argued until the end of the Mishnah, and in the beginning of the Mishnah, when it talks about, what's the beginning of the Mishnah talk about? What's the beginning of the Mishnah talk about? Not chametz, not doing malacha on Erev Pesach. And there, Rabbi Yehuda never argued. Rabbi Yehuda never says, wait a second, I'm coming from a town. Is mashma that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Ikka principle that you have to keep all the chumras. If that's the case, why does Rabbi Yehuda argue in the Sefer? Oh, so again, so Rashi explains that Rabbi Yehuda means okay, it's more understand. I said Rabbi Rashi think, okay, I hear. So the Gemara says like this. Omar Yehuda was coming to tell us another thing. That means there's a missing clause in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is missing another question, and that's one which Yehuda is arguing about. Tanakama says, if you go from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim, and in Bnei Brak it wasn't finished, and Yerushalayim it wasn't finished, so you don't need to do biur. But when you get to Yerushalayim, you suddenly hear that the place that you came from was finished. Comes along the Tanna Kama and says you have to do Biur. Why do you have to do Biur? Why do you have to do Biur? Because you've heard that the place that you bought the fruit from is no longer got any left. So if you come from Neivak to Yerushalayim, and you find that in both places there was not finished, but when you get to Yerushalayim, you find out that in Bnei Brak it was finished, then you have to do Biur. He can tell the people in Bnei Brak who are upset with him, hey, you're sitting in Yerushalayim eating the fruit. We can't eat any more oranges. He can say to them, if you were to come to Yerushalayim, you would be able to get. And therefore, you've got no taina, and therefore you can say that you don't have to do Biur. So again, the first Ma'alech in the Gemara. What?
The oranges he's got came from Bnei.
Yes.
Because he can tell them, come here.
That's right. You come here to Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim it's not kolu, therefore you're pot.
Why did they get a date stamp?
Why did they get what? Sorry?
Why did they get a geolocation? Say fruit and arid soil. If it's fruit and arid soil.
No, we will see. It's
everyone
different.
Could say, even a person in Yerushalayim, he's got his fruit in his house. He goes to go to somewhere there it is.
Oh, so we will see that it goes according to the place that you live in. Because the more we'll see, I'm not sure if you're asking this question. Well, later we will see. Let's say in Bnei Brak there isn't. That's very good. The Gemara discusses at great length. The Gemara discusses at great length. What does that mean? That means, for example, let's say, for example, in Bnei Brak there's no oranges, a Petach Tikva there is, which is right next to. So I'm mechuyev to do Biur in Bnei Brak. Or can I say to people, wait a second? Okay, right. But we're talking about, okay.
It should not be clear on that.
No, so more discusses, we're talking about two different towns, how far the towns have to be. So again, so far we've had two understandings of Rabbi Yehuda. One understanding is that he's being meikol and he's saying that since the end of the day I came from a town, lo yikolu, it's okay. The Gemara says, but then he's coming to be arguing with Chum v'Makush Yotzei Chum K'Mosholach Misham. So the Gemara answers, we're talking about another case. And now we don't have the kasha of what about the chumras of everywhere? Why don't we have that question? Because you are keeping the chumras. When you went from Bnei Brak, they still had oranges left. When you got to Yerushalayim, they still had oranges left. So you're not going to insult anybody by carrying on eating oranges. Only people in Bnei Brak will get upset. That's the Machlek Tanna Kama Rabbi Yehuda. And there we don't have the question of Chumim Makom Shos Misham Chum Makom Sholach. Says the Gemara, Lememu Rabbi Yehuda lekula. Is Rabbi Yehuda coming to be meikol? Kama v'Omar b'Elazar lo Omar Rabbi Yehuda elo lechum. He had a tradition. Rashi says that Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah was being machmir on the Tanna Kama. And the way we explained our Mishnah is being meikol. Elo epoch eino echad lebaim. That the Chachamim say you don't have to destroy. Why? Because in Yerushalayim there's still oranges left. Rabbi Yehuda says, wait a second, bring from the original place. It's finished. So we've got a third malach. This malach is that Rabbi Yehuda is being machmir, the same story, the same situation. And what happened was, a person came from one town to another. There was left in the first town, there was left in the second town. But in the second town, he found out that the first town was finished. So Rabbi Yehuda says that you have to destroy it because in the first town where you brought it from, there's none left. Okay. Says the Gemara, Abaya says, as the Mishnah says, if you look at the small tesis, that's the third tesis down. Abaya didn't like this answer. Why? Because according to this answer, the Mishnah is talking about three different cases. One case where the first town ran out, one case where the second town ran out, one case where neither town ran out until you got to the second town and then the first town ran out. And that third case, there was not a breath of it in the Mishnah. Abai prefers to try and find the Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim within the parameters of the Mishnah, even though indeed it's not something the Mishnah talks about explicitly, but it's something that can be deduced from the Mishnah. While according to this other explanation we had till now, it wasn't deduced from the Mishnah, you couldn't say it's the words of the Mishnah. So we also said, what happens if you went from A to B and then back from B to A? And what happened was, in A, it never ran out. And in B, it ran out. But then you went back to A. So the Gemara says, in the first place, it hasn't run out. Says, you don't have to destroy. Why not? Because you're in a town where it's not run out, and you took it from the town where it never ran out, so it's okay. In the end of the day, where have you bought it from now?
Finished.
Where it's finished. So therefore, it's no good, and you have to destroy it. Okay. Says the Gemara, the back of the donkey absorbs them. At the end of the day, you were traveling and traveling and traveling. You went from A to B and from B to A. And in A, it never ran out. Me'echet should start worrying about the fact that in B it ran out. Just because it was on the back of the donkey when it was traveling through, let's say, Yerushalayim, so suddenly now it's no good. Me'echet says such a thing. So what it says, Elamar Rashi b'prukta tani tanoi. A different machlok, because it's not. A person pickles 3 different kinds of vegetables in one bowl. I said potatoes, onions, and carrots in one bowl. And then what happened was, different vegetables have different manabir. And the question is, do you go? There are 3 ways to look at it. One shitta is, according to Rashi says, the 3 ways are, you do 3 pickles in one bowl. One is the most machmir, that once one of them is finished manabir, you have to get rid of all of them. Why? What's the logic? Because each one absorbs the taste of the other. You pickled all 3 together. Let's say you've got cucumbers, tomatoes, and carrots in one bowl pickled. And cucumbers have run out. If you say, okay, I won't eat more cucumbers, I eat the tomatoes, but it's pickled in one bowl, so therefore it's no good. Another opinion is, no, each one according to its min. The third opinion, that makes a lot of sense. When the cucumbers are finished, stop eating cucumbers. When tomatoes are finished, stop eating the carrots. The third opinion is the most kuladik. As long as one of the 3 is okay, you're allowed to eat all 3. That's how Rashi explains. Let's just see. Yes, Beinaga. It is Beinaga. Yes, we have. Okay, we'll do it inside. We'll look at tastes. You pickle 3 pickles in one bowl, 3 different kinds of lezo. You can only eat while the first one's permitted. Once the first one's forbidden, what's the din? They're all forbidden. And you can eat as long as one of them is permitted. That's not so hard. Again, you got cucumbers, tomatoes, and carrots. You're told that the cucumbers run out. So Rashi explains that Yehuda is being machmir like shittas that you have to have seva hovelecha afato. Go and think from yourself, says Rabbi Yehuda, meaning go and find that min, and since you can't find that min, you can't eat it anymore because now there's no more cucumbers in the fields. Tanna Kama holds no, as long as it's one of the 3, it is okay. That's just Tanna Kama. So Tanna Kama is being makeup, we're just doing machmir. Let's just run through a little bit of this last taste. Going left verse is kind of radish or bots and onions with flutes and potatoes. Have you ever had a salad made out of pickled radish, onions, and potatoes? Nice salad. So then, she'ein biur and shava, they don't get finished at the same time. How can you eat? Let's say, for example, the cucumbers and the radishes and onions are finished. We still got a few potatoes left in the field. Why are you allowed to count eating it? So the Rebbe brings a svar, Avinu Tam, that there's a special pasuk. The pasuk is because man shata oichel. So he says like this. The drush of the chaya is that as long as there's an availability, even if it's only an availability in some way, that's okay. Okay. Another pshat he brings is that, again, it's like this. We're talking about where you took it out, and all we're talking about is only the taste. Okay. I mean, like this. Which of course you can't eat the pickles after it's finished. We're talking about you pickled 3 different vegetables, and then let's say the cucumbers were finished in the field, so you took the cucumber out. The question is, can you still eat the radishes and the tomato and the potatoes? The svar being, the machlikas being, is it a shaila? Did the Torah forbid tam as well? That's the machlikas of here. Well, of course, the actual vegetable, according to everybody, is forbidden. So again, this is already a 4th mahalach pshat machlikas and the Kama of Yehuda in our Mishnah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we're being machmir that you're not allowed to eat the vegetable once it's finished. According to the Chachamim, you're allowed to, as long as one of them is done. This is the 5th and last machluk pshat. The prukta tahani tanoim. That's not. Soya was a place renowned for the dates. When the last date in soya is finished, you're not allowed to eat any more dates. What happens is like this. When you've got a very big date tree, what happens is there are dates on the tree, and then when they fall, they get trapped. If you haven't seen a picture of a date tree, there's a lot of thorns and thistles, a lot of sharp spikes going up it. What? Palm trees. What did I say?
Not only palm trees, date tree.
Okay, you're right. It's more grammatically correct as a palm tree.
Yes.
Okay. I do have date trees, which are palm trees in English. There's machlokes Tanakama and Shulchan Gamliel. Tanakama holds as long as there's dates anywhere, you're allowed to carry on eating dates.
Anywhere in the country?
No, anywhere on the tree. Shulchan Gamliel says only if it's on the branches. Dates on the thorns, the animals don't get at. So therefore, it's no longer v'lachaya shabat secha. So therefore, it's machlokes Tanakama. That's the machlokes. Again, let's read the words based on base top line. You're allowed to eat the ones that are growing on the branches. You're not allowed to eat the ones that are growing, which are on the thorns. That's the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda says, go and bring them from the thorns. You have to always fit into the words of Rabbi Yehuda. From the thorns, it's very hard to get. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if you can't get it, you can't eat it. Rashi Tanakama says no. As long as there's existence of dates around in the fields, that's good enough. No, also the thorns. It seems it gets trapped. If you get a picture, they've got like these. A lot of the dates will get trapped. It take a week or two. So then also, we've learned there. We're going into halachas of shmita. Sholosh atzis lebiu. There are three. Eretzol Levi is split up into three parts. Yehuda ve'Vayad and the Golem. Yehuda, Evayad, and the Golem. Mikbachik is showing Evayad, and do we mean on the side, the eastern side, where moving God, the Chatzshev Nash lived, or do we mean on the western side of the Yarden? And we're talking about was Zvulun and Yisroel lived, which was on the other side of the Yarden. The Gemara will explain that we learned the drasha that wild animals, as long as there's in the public, you're allowed to eat in the private. Now, what happens is, I swear happy because somebody asked me. The Gemara tells us that wild animals only go in certain territory. So, for example, Eretzol is split into three areas. If you live, let's say, in Yehuda, so you're allowed to eat while somewhere in Yehuda there's dates, it's okay. But if there is an Eva Yarden or in the Golem, you can't eat. So somebody said to me, imagine you live on the border. You're 1 minute away from the border of the Golem. And you want to eat dates. And you say to yourself, what do wild animals eat? He says, you've got to look in the Yehuda. Now, in the whole of the Yehuda, there's no dates. But a minute away, there isn't a Galil. So you're not allowed to eat. Why not? Because in your part, there isn't. Why not? Because wild animals won't eat. He said, the wild animal knows where the demarcation line is. They know where the line is split. So I saw V'liashiv Nahos. V'liashiv says, Mamish Chazal knew these things. Even if it's less than 4 amos away from the Galil, the animal will not cross over, it relies, and it will go to the other end of the Yehuda. It will go to the other end of Yehuda to get a date rather than to go into the Galil. So Eretzol is split into 3 lines. If you live in Galil, you have to find out if any dates left in the Galil. If you live in Yehuda, in Yehuda. If you live in Evayad, in Evayad. The Mishnah also says that each part of the country has 3 v'sholosh artzis b'chol achas v'achas. Each part of Eretzol has 3 parts. One of the wonderful things about Eretzol is that it's not a boring country, so to speak. It's got many different changes. The terrain changes all the time. Rashi says that every part of Eretz Yisrael has mountains. All these 3 parts has mountains, valleys, and plains. And each one is good for a different kind of crop. Now Rashi says, halacha l'maisa, we ignore the fact that it has mountains, valleys, and plains. We're only interested, it's not split into 9, it's split into 3. That means there's 3 areas. Each one is split into 3 kinds of terrain. But halachically, we're only interested in the first 3, Yehuda, Golem, Evayad. I just want to see very quickly, if you mind again, I never know how much to do the taste. Let's know based on today's top taste. Ashich v'achashur, Pirush conscious. Achatichva achroinu shebatz Yisrael in its land. V'ashurish atzis shebchol achas, the 3 parts in each one, shovese. Ve'nir, says the taste, I don't agree. Dim enam chalukos. If there's no difference between the 3 kinds of land, why does the Mishnah need to tell us here that there's 3 parts? The Tzam B'Perek Tes, it says before, Says Tosfos that no, that if you live in the mountains, you have to go according to the mountains. And if you live in the valley, it's in the valley. And if you live in the plains, in the plains. The Kachye Shloima, if you go mix up a few more lines, the Achon Shba, the Pil Shba, Shich Lachon Shba, Pil Shba Mokim, Shich Lachon Shba Mokim, Chim Shvela, Shich Lachon Shvela. So you have to, and the brings the Bisham, Yeshua Chibaik, says, in Chaya Shba, Gedele Beimek, a mountain animal will never eat fruit from the valley. And the valley one, the Chase Kai, is a Hashba Gedele Baal. So therefore, it comes out that they're so split into 9 areas. And if you want to know Zman HaBiur, you have to first work out your Yehuda and Galilee by Yarden, and then after that you have to find out, are you in the mountain, the plains, or the valley? Yeah, you're just that's not. The mission is just praising Eretz Yisrael that's got extra 3 parts, but the first part is halachic. Yehuda by Yarden Galilee. The second part, you're right. Let's see what more says. I want to read it again because Sholosh Artis the Biur, Yehuda ve'Yadim ve'Golim. V'Sholosh Artis v'Cholachas v'Achas. There's 3 lines in each one. V'Lomom Sholosh Artis the Biur, She'oichli b'Cholachas v'Achas ad she'ichlo achlin shebo until the last one is finished. Mino an emidah v'chom v'okom v'bis v'chanino ma'kol v'hem techo v'lachaya she'ba'atzecho. You can give your animals and your wild animals, because man she'chayo cheles v'na'asod, while the wild animals can eat in the field, ha'chele be'imo she'b'bayis. Kolo lechaya she'b'sod. Once the chayo is finished in the field, you have to destroy it in your house. And we know so therefore we know that this is the way it works. Therefore, if you want to know Zman HaBiur, you have to go according to the part of the Eretz that you're in. You can destroy them wherever you want. This is one of the biggest shuvas and halachas Arba Minim. The Gemara says, let's just finish off. You should bring them back to Eretz Yisrael and burn them there. So let's say, have you ever had an essay from Shemitah from England? You all had probably. Oh, Sean will tell us, where do you Yisraelim come from? Only Morocco, you're doing anything from Eretz Yisrael. I'm sure you bring stuff from Eretz Yisrael. Shemitah, you also bring from Eretz Yisrael. You only bring Morocco in the year of Shmita? Oh, I never knew that. Oh, wow. See? It's a machmir. Otherwise, you have to send them back. And that's a very big chumrah. So Rashi writes that you don't have to. Thankfully, he says you don't have to. We'll come to discuss more and more why you don't have to. There's a famous story. The Netziv once got an esrog. That's right.
Always a way.
Yes. Very briefly, in the start of the story, I don't know why it comes in the Netziv. One of the biographies of the Netziv was that what happened was he once got an esrog on Sukkot, and he spent the night learning, does he have to send the esrog back or not? He was very worried about it. And he woke up, I think his grandson was Chaim of Brisk. He woke him up at about 3-4 in the morning to tell him what he had come to the conclusion. There's a tshuva about it. So Chaim said to him, I'm very sorry, but I need to say Birchas HaTorah first. While I was saying Birchas HaTorah, then the Siv started crying. Why are you crying? So that in my old age, I should see that my grandson at this time of day hasn't said Birchas HaTorah. That's the reason for a grandfather to cry. Anyway, but that was the famous tshuva. It was very discussing this question. But the Maisa, if we can, I just want to look at this thesis for 1 minute. So here we have, I discussed it once before, we're not inside. What does it mean, biur? What does biur mean? I said to you before, machlekes. Everybody remember the machlekes I said? What is biur? Very good, destroy it. Very good. Not burn it, destroy it. And other you say? Very good. Oh. Rashi, let's do thesis. You can read the thesis and you'll get the chizuk from I told you what my neighbor used to do. You have to get it to be trampled. You put it down somewhere, will get trampled. Everybody agrees that poor people are whether poor or even rich people are to eat it. Let's read the words of Tosfos loud. This is, I don't know how many times I saw it being done. When you see something being done, it's more exciting. What do you used to do? You put the fruit by your entrance. Achenu Beis Yisrael, Misha Tzorech Litoil, Yitoil, V'choizo Machnasech Pesach, V'elech V'echel Ad Sheyichlu. We said you're not allowed to. That we never mafkit, see, yes, that's fine. Doesn't matter. It's after the biur. Very good. So what you have to do is that what would happen is they would never be sure when biur is. Can't be 100% sure. So people would do biur again and again. I used to see people coming out with boxes of grape juice bottles. They'd come outside and say, Achenu Beis Yisrael, everybody help yourself. And I never felt comfortable.
No one took.
Does he know?
No one took.
Even the guy knows no one will take.
No, so I don't know.
I'm not, you should take a couple. Just to make him feel he's done
I don't know. Would you have taken? I don't know. Taken and given back to him. Anyway, what happened was, he never, and this is mamish the words of Tosfos. People would stand and be mafkir. I remember people would come out, they would say, today, I told you, there were people would get boxes and boxes of grape juice and big discount, a big amount, put them outside, everybody help yourself. After 5 minutes, take it back in. Okay.
No.
No
one will take it.
I don't know if no. I'm saying I remember my neighbor lived opposite to me, Chukas it was called, and then he used to do it and everything. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's a proper way of getting on.
Tosfos just said.
I just did you not read the words of Tosfos? I thought you'd be dancing after reading the words of Tosfos. Listen to Tosfos again. Rashi and the Rambam don't agree with it. That's fair enough, but we don't pass like Rashi and the Rambam. We pass like Tosfos. Again, according to Rashi and the Rambam, what would you have to do? Take the grape juice and pour it down the sink. Well, it's very hard to get animals to get safe to trample when you bought a grape to pour it down the sink. But according to Tosfos, he says that you take it out to your friends and relatives and you say, anybody who wants, take. Again.
Yeah, but put it outside for 5 minutes, probably like the anyone's going to take.
Tosfos, look at Tosfos. Look at Tosfos. And then Tosfos says, bring it back in. No, because after biur you do. After biur you have to destroy it. After Zman biur, not before that. Okay, we're getting off the point. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Not to waste the grape juice. Yes, we'll come to that in a minute. Says the Gemara, came and bring it back, we spar and destroy it. In your land. You already use the word ba'atzcha, that it has to be in your land. We dash in two droshes. One, it could have said ba'oretz, which would mean in Eretz Yisrael. It says ba'atzcha, extra chof to teach you what that you have to do biur in Eretz Yisrael. Inami ma'asher ba'atzcha. The droshes word asher. So we have two droshes. If somebody say to you, what do you learn from the pasuk v'lachaya asher ba'atzcha tirkol tvos alecha? What would you dash the word asher ba'atzcha? Two droshes. What are the two droshes? What do you dash in that while the wild animals have got to eat, you're allowed to eat. When they don't have, you're not. And that you have to do biur in Eretz Yisrael. It's a mitzvah to do biur in Eretz Yisrael. Says the Gemara. Rav Safa nofak Eretz Yisrael lechutzlaretz. Rav Safa went from Eretz Yisrael to chutzlaretz. Have a bad day. Garba de chamba de shviz. He had a barrel of wine of shvita. Lovu bad day of Ikivam Kahana. He had two Talmidei Chachamim accompanying him. And then he realized they'd done a mistake. What was his mistake? That he had taken shmita food from Eretz Yisrael to chutzlaretz. Omar lehu iked shmiel lehu minei jabavo aloch yishun alozo eloi. Does anybody know Pasuk Shemon Aloza? If Pasuk Shemon Aloza, what do I have to do? If Pasuk Shemon Aloza, what do I have to do? Go back to Eretz Yisrael. If I don't, I can stay in the Chutz La'aretz. Do I have to go back to Eretz Yisrael? So as you can imagine, whenever you have two Amorim, that the Machlokes do Pasuk Shemon Aloza, and you can imagine this was a very big question because he had this barrel of wine. He needed to either go all the way back to Eretz Yisrael or not. And he had an argument, do we pass him? Shimon Aloza says, where do you do biur? Where do you do biur according to Shimon Aloza? Only in Eretz Yisrael. So the question is, do we pass him Shimon Aloza or not? No, it was already after Zman biur, he couldn't. I just want to do again the last Tosfos. There's a very bit of history on the last Tosfos. You're not allowed to. So how could he do such? How could that moyer do an aveil? The tirets, the also marry la'achila. For eating, you're not allowed to. For business, you're allowed to. The Inami Beshigi Yitzidid by mistake it acted in Navi. The Chaznish learned this thesis. I don't know if I should say this. Okay, Rashi brings it down. And he saw this thesis, he was extremely bothered. Why? Tesis asks a steer, in one place Yom Safar took out, another place we're told you're not allowed to. So Tesis answers that for business you're allowed to, for eating you're not allowed to. For eating, which is the main purpose of Shemitah fruit, you're not allowed to. And for business, which you're normally not allowed to do business with Shemitah fruit, you're allowed to. It doesn't make any sense. The Chaznish felt he had no choice, but he changed the words of Tesis, crossed them out, and he changed it the other way around. The problem is, well, I'm going to say this, is that since the Chazanish was nifta, we've found manuscript from the Tesis Shantz and the Tesis in the parents. Rashi writes all this. I saw myself. You look inside, not my other Gemara. I've got to the red Gemara. But the red Gemara got Tesis in the parents at the back, and he brings the same question and the same answer as Tesis. It's very hard to keep changing the Gilsois. So when Rashi says you can't pass, you have to retract a little bit. But the Maisa, either way, halacha the Maisa doesn't change so much. Chaznish holds you're not allowed to take fruit. Why? Because second is b'shoigig. They did it by mistake. If that's the case, that Tesis is saying that maybe whatever you do is forbidden. So therefore, the Chaznish held was also. It was interesting that he changed it around that from achila to schera. Okay. So the Maisa, Rav Safra took a barrel of wine, and he wasn't sure should he take it back or not. He asked his two Talmidim, and they told him it's machloikas, or he didn't say machloikas. They said to him, one said halacha l'shon alot, the other said halacha l'alot. Not. Omar Safa. Listen to Rav Huna, who was machmi or maker. Does anybody remember? Maker. One was maker. Okay. So he said, let's go after Rav Huna. Why? Because he listens carefully during Shiur. Since he listens carefully during Shiur, Rashi says he used to do chazor after Shiur. Therefore, you should listen to Rav Huna. Now, who do we know that was the classic example of somebody that was careful to listen to Shiur? We do have it once before.
We had it already.
You've had it. Yes, we've had it. No. We had it in Brachos. Oh, Kerachvo the Pumpadisa, like the Amoira of Rachvo. Now, what did he do? The Omar Rachvo Mabiuta Beis Tov Kofaloyo Soto Liftim Soto. It had one set of benches within another set of benches. So, because he said that halacha, he obviously was a big medactic in halacha. We're going to come to in a minute to understand what was special about that statement to say that Yerushalayim, that the Beis Hamikdash, the Azor had two sets of benches. What's special about that? Rav Yosef was irritated with Kahana. Ami be'etza yishal u'makro yagid lo. The Novi is criticizing Kali so that they listen to Avodah Zarah. So when they want to do something, what do? They ask a piece of wood and they stick what they should do. And he used the words, he paraphrased the words, maklo, it could be a stick, and it could be meikol. Meikol yagid lo. Meikol magid lo. That the reason he listened to Rav Huna was because he was being meikol and not because Rav Huna is correct. Okay. So now we've got a big question. What was special about Rachvo that he's the one that we know that he was careful with his language? Rashi here says, okay, we'll say first. Rashi in Brocha says, because everybody seems to like that Rashi, that the normal word for a bench in the Torah in the Gemara is itztaba. Itztaba. And here he used the word stav, which is not a common word. Why did he use the non-common word? Because his Rebbe used that word. And since he was so careful in Chazal Shiur, he made sure to repeat it with the same language as his Rebbe. And that was the greatness of Rachva Pumpadisa. That's how Rashi Brochus explains. Rashi there brings another explanation, which is the Gemara, which Rashi explains here. Rashi says that's absolute nonsense. Rashi here brings it. A very interesting pshat. That Rachva could not remember who told it to him. Was it Rabbi Yehuda, who was an Amoya living in Bavel, or Rabbi Yehuda Nisir, who was not Rebbe who wrote the Mishnayos, but a grandson of his who lived in Eretz Yisrael? He couldn't remember who it was. Was it Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yehuda Nisir? So what did he do? He quoted it whenever he said it over in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, missing out the Nisir. That way he perpetuated the confusion as to who was the one who said it. Because had he said Rabbi Yehuda, you think it's Rabbi Yehuda from Babel. Had he said Rabbi Yehuda Nisir, you think it's one from Eretz Yisrael. By saying Rabbi Yehuda, you'll never know who it was. Was it Rabbi Yehuda Nisir? Why did he miss out the Nisir? And if it was Rabbi Yehuda, why did he say Rabbi Yehuda? By saying Rabbi Yehuda without saying the Sir, it's actually I'm not sure if it's A or B, I say a phrase which is a mixture of both. And that was the greatness of Rachman from Padisa, that he perpetuated the confusion as to whether he heard this from Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yehuda. And Rashi Bochas demolishes this pshat. But Rashi here says this pshat. No, you have to change the Gilsa. You have to change the Gilsa, I'm sorry. Yeah, Omar Achma, Omar Rabbi. No, my Gemara has changed it to Rabbi. If you look at this side, the Bedu Hananel says that what he did was even more complicated. He changed the name from Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda, and he called it Rabbi Yehuda with an Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda. What did he gain by adding the Aleph? The same thing, perpetuating the confusion. Was it Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yehuda? So, yes, and the Gemara was praising him that he was so careful about repeating the Shiur that he couldn't remember who was the one who said it. He didn't just say, "Okay, I'll say it over." He should remember if there was that. Yeah, yes, I know. That's what Rashi Bochas says. And Rashi says, that's Rashi Bochas asking. But it's not. If you think about it like this, if I say to you a statement, you can't remember that I say to Shem Zalman, and you repeat the Shem, say, I know the Shem, you're showing that other things you do remember. This is the only thing you can't remember is who said it and you're not sure. But everything else you're remembering. Okay.
Yeah, but the mice is making confusion because you can't know who said it.
So what? But he's remembering the confusion. And that itself is a greatness because he's showing that you care.
He heard the confusion?
He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember.
It's his problem, meaning he should say, I don't remember who said it.
But okay, did you hear a share 20 years ago and then afterwards you're going to say you give up on remembering? That's okay, that's the gadlus. The gadlus was he was medactic to remember. I want to go weiter. We did every taste in the summit. Somebody said, Moshe pointed out, you're not allowed to ruin the fruit of Shemitah. Therefore, Havdalah wine of Shemitah, you don't pour it on your Havdalah candle because you're going to.
Not confusing it though.
No, because it's waste. You could drink it and you're wasting it on the minute. So the halacha is you're not allowed to destroy it. Came along Rabbi Eloi and he cut down a branch of fruit of Shemitah. Once I had to speak of his other days, he always have to find like interesting topics. Once I spoke about the topic of cutting down fruit trees. Since you have quite a lot of questions afterwards, people are very busy with it. Now, from the Gemara, it is clear that if financially it's worth it for you, you're allowed to do it. Because here the Gemara is only going to discuss the problem of the fruit of Shemitah. But there's a Yehuda Chosid who holds that you mustn't. And nowadays we've come to the stage where Yehuda Chosid will get very, very nervous. You could do a kinyan to another guy, yeah? You ask one guy to say it to another guy. What? Right, it's the best way to do it to get a go to another go. That's the best way. Like what over here says, they cut down a tree of true fruit. Now, what happened was this tree wasn't a brilliant tree. It had on it dates which are not fully grown. You have to eat and not destroy it. Only when it's a full fruit. When it's not properly ripe. It's not ripe, so there's no mitzvah to look after it. There was a husk around the fruit of Olo, which protects the fruit when it's still only a bud. It's still only what's a good word for very small fruit? A bud or not ripe fruit. Since they're guarding the fruit, you're not allowed to get pleasure from the husk. Olo is asaban. No, you're not allowed to get pleasure from the husk either. When is a shema bekufi when it's still only not ripe? Look at kolu pevi, so it's still called a fruit. So you see that even when something's not ripe, it's called a fruit. And if it's called a fruit, you're not allowed to destroy it. So how could he cut down the date tree on Shemitah? As well, Nachman Domar Yosi, the Dan of Yosi Oima, Smada also Peshu pevi. That of Nachman, that when something's not ripe, it's already got the name of a fruit, it's Shittas Rabbi Yosi, but the Chachamim argue. So now we're going to go into a discussion regarding Aleph, Hilchas Shemitah, that you're not allowed to destroy fruit of Shemitah. Beis, all of fruit, that you're not allowed to get Hano. When is something considered a fruit? When would you consider? You've got apple trees. When is it called a fruit? At one stage there's a flower, then the flower falls off, and then you've got a tiny growth, and it gets bigger and bigger. When does it get the name of a fruit? Says Rav Nachman held like a Byosi that is a fruit. But Rabbi Eloi that cut it down held like the Chachamim that's not a fruit, and therefore he's allowed to cut it down. Says well, Masklav Shimim Adol. Me Pliga Ben Alei Rabbi Yisrael Shalom. Or do they argue regarding other trees? Maybe they only argue regarding not regarding dates. They more explain. But nan Meimus and Kritzin Salon is B'Shvius. When are you not allowed to cut down a fruit tree on Shemitah? You're not allowed to cut down a fruit tree on Shemitah. Why not? As we said, because you're ruining the fruit. So when? Rashi says B'shiyotziu. Look at the bottom line of Rashi. B'shiyotziu. As long as it's got leaves on, you're not allowed to cut down the tree. Rashi is being very, very machmir. But others argue the Rashi that it means once it comes out, even the smallest B'shiyotziu just means once they take out, once they produce. Rashi over here says B'shiyotziu means once they produce leaves, you're not allowed to cut it down because it's already considered a fruit tree. Others say B'shiyotziu means once the smallest fruit, that's considered B'shiyotziu. Now, Beis Hillel came up with a long list of shittas, long list. Beis Hillel, achavuvin, carob trees, b'shiyishishu. Once they look like a necklace. Carob trees, when they grow a few, it starts looking like a necklace, like a chain. V'akfanim, grape trees, vines, b'shiyah, top of Nun Gimel Dalif Mishiyah Griu. Once they grow a tiny amount, the size of a bean. V'azesim Mishiyah Nitzu. And olive trees, once they get to the stage of nates, right? It's by the fruit of the Sar Mashkim, right? And Nitzu Ashkedeseo Kfanim. Remember Rashi, the whole Avich was what the word nates, a certain measurement. With all other trees, they agree with Reshamai. That the size of boisa, which is the beginning of the fruit, is the same size as givua, and it's the same size as pula lovan. Pula is a bean. When a bean is a bean, when a grape becomes the size of a white bean, according to Beis Hillel, it's considered a fruit tree and no longer allowed to cut it down. So the Maisa we see a machlikas b'shama Beis Hillel, when are you allowed to cut down a fruit tree? The Maisa says, well, mine shama stay that you're allowed to cut down when it is only not ripe, it's okay. But smodaloid, but once it starts growing, it's forbidden. Rabbanon, because according to Rabbi Yossi, even from the beginning, it is forbidden. When it comes to all other fruit trees other than these trees, the second it starts growing, it's forbidden. The Rishonim say two malachim are related. Either he was using a tree, which was a male tree, and male trees, the fruit never ripen. So by cutting down the tree, he was not affecting the fruit from growing because it's a male tree that doesn't ripen. Alternatively, it's referring to a ruined tree, a tree which was ill. And therefore, since it was a tree, it's the same idea, but just different nuschois, that what happened was either it was a faulty tree or a male tree. Either way, the fruit would never ripen, and therefore you have to cut it down. So it comes out like this: that are you allowed to cut down a tree on Shemitah, which has got fruit on? Right, so you've got three stages. When it's fully ripe, you've got no problem. When it's not a proper growth of a fruit, it's also no problem. In the middle, then it's no good because it's a proper fruit, and by cutting down, it won't ripen. And in the middle stage, it's permitted if it will never ripen, then it's permitted. Okay, we're up to Tonu Rabbanon and Gimel Amud Aleph. Sure. Good night.